Hey, sorry if there's road noise. They're doing something to the street outside my apartment, but it's a beautiful day, so I wanted to be outside to make this April wrap-up. So I do have captions on this video. If the road noise is back and is awful, just turn the sound off and read along. I wanted to go through the books that I had on my TBR and whether or not I read them. So I think this is my whole TBR. I did not rewatch that video, but maybe you have. This month was the Best Picture Readathon. This is the second year we've had a Best Picture Readathon, and the first year it went for the whole month. And I'm really glad it went for the whole month because I read more than half of the books that I intended to. I read 5 of 8 books, so just a little over half. I've also seen 5 of the 8 movies nominated this year, but I did not read only the prompts for the movies that I've seen. The first prompt was The Father, which the prompt for that was to read a book with a parent-child relationship, and I don't have this copy, but I borrowed The Best We Could Do, which is a graphic memoir about the author and her parents who were Vietnamese refugees after the Vietnam War. She, in the memoir, goes over what it was like for them while the war was happening, and then as they came to the U.S., and a little bit about growing up with her parents having this trauma from the war and from the circumstances around the war, and how that affected their parenting and their ability to connect. Then for Judas and the Black Messiah, I was supposed to read an anti-racist book or a book that is about Black history, and I have the books that I was going to read, and I just did not get to them this month, but I will 100% be getting to 2 of these for my May TBR. So I read like one essay in A Good Time for the Truth, Race in Minnesota, but did not finish it. I don't know if I'm going to finish that one in May, but the 2 books I am going to finish in May both apply to this. One is Black Spartacus, The Epic Life of Toussaint Louverture, which is about the Haitian Rebellion, I believe. And the other is Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, The Origins of Our Discontents. I believe it is about the way that Black Americans have been treated throughout history in the United States as sort of an unspoken caste, like lower caste. I think that's what it is. So these 2 I will for sure be reading in May because I'm actually reading them for the Nonfiction BookTube Prize or the BookTube Nonfiction Prize. So I will get to those in May. I just did not get to them this month. For the third movie nominated, that was Mank, and you're supposed to choose a book you forgot about that's on your shelf or TBR for more than a year. And I read for this one, this is the only book I actually own that I read this month. It was Me, the Missing and the Dead by Jenny Valentine. This was also off of my Twitter TBR this month, and I am counting it for my Unread Shelf Challenge, which for the month of April was to read a book from a used bookstore. I bought this at the library secondhand. It's an ex-library book, and it was chosen for me by @MarinK on Twitter. It was wrapped when it was chosen. This is what was underneath that wrapping paper. And this was an interesting kind of book about a kid sort of dealing with his father's disappearance through finding this urn of unclaimed ashes at like a local taxi station. So it was short, it was a quick read. I don't fully know how I feel about it yet. So if you've read this and you have feelings or thoughts on it, let me know. Most of the books I read this month I don't have to hold up for you because they were from the library and have already returned them to the library because, as you will see when you watch my May TBR, the library has finally called and asked for their books back. All right, the 4th movie nominated for Best Picture this year was Minari? I think that's how you say it. I was pronouncing this wrong in my head up until I literally watched the movie and found out that the word that it's named after, how it's actually pronounced. For this, we were just supposed to read a memoir or a book with autobiographical influences. I had a couple options for this, and I ended up reading something completely different. Instead, I read Notes on a Silencing by Lacey Crawford, which was for the BookTube Nonfiction Prize. I listened to the audiobook, and so I can't tell you how I felt about it, but I wanted you to know that that is what I chose. It is a memoir about the author's time at a very prestigious boarding school and the fact that she was sexually assaulted and contracted an STI from that experience, and how the system itself, instead of like closing around her to protect her, started attacking her in order to protect itself. I had read an excerpt from the memoir when it was released that fall, and in a lot of ways I think that was a good preview of the book, but the book just goes into a lot more of the trauma and details of what happened to the author, both at the time and since The fifth movie that was nominated for Best Picture is actually the one that won, and that is Nomadland. For Nomadland, we wanted you to choose a book about travel or a traveler. I chose for this A Heart in a Body in the World by Deb Coletti, but I have not read this yet, and it is a little further down my list for due dates at the library, so I might read this one in early June. I do not know if I will read it in May. For Promising Young Woman, I was supposed to choose a book about a controversial topic, and I wanted to read The End of Policing by Alex Vitale, I think is his name. I have this on my Kindle, and I just have not picked it up yet. The Derek Chauvin trial was happening in the month of April, so I thought that I would want to read this book. And I still want to read this book, but also it feels like homework, so I'm having a little bit of a block in actually starting. So I don't know what I need to do or how I need to get myself to start it, but at some point I need to actually start it and stick to it. So upcoming, I guess. The seventh movie nominated for Best Picture was Sound of Metal, and for this you had an option. So in this movie, the protagonist is experiencing sudden hearing loss and also is an addict, and he goes to sort of like a rehab designed for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And so we chose for the prompt that you could either pick a book with a deaf protagonist or hard of hearing protagonist, or you could pick a book that has a protagonist who is dealing with substance abuse. For this, I checked out a bunch of books from the library, and what I ended up reading, I really enjoyed, and it was just playing to my knowledge that inevitably I was going to read some romance novels within the month of April, so why not read some that actually fulfill the prompts that I'm supposed to be doing? So I read a book called Signs of Attraction. I'm forgetting the name of the author right now. I read it on my phone. I got it as an ebook, and I really enjoyed it. The actual, plot momentum and conflict was provided by other factors in their life. Like, the conflict in their life was not their deafness or their being hard of hearing. The conflict was provided by other things in their life. I thought that they were I don't know. I'm just a sucker for romance, I guess. So I enjoyed this one, and I just wish it were a little longer, actually. I wanted to follow the characters a little further into their lives. The final movie that was nominated for Best Picture was Trial of the Chicago 7, and for that we were supposed to pick a book with a number in the title, and again, playing to my wanting to read romance novels and wanting to read the kind of quick, light, fluffy things, I read One to Watch, which is about a fat protagonist who is a style blogger, and in order to sort of promote more fat positivity and the ability of fat women to also find love, agrees to go on a bachelorette style show as the main character. I enjoyed this book a lot. I think there's a lot of beats that are okay, I want to be honest with you, I don't watch The Bachelor or The Bachelorette because it's just too much it's so slow. But I felt that my perception from the outside of how the tropes that were brought up in the show and the book, they are things that I could see the show doing. It was pretty funny. I thought that a lot of the men on the show were well fleshed out. There was more than one good option, but it also felt like there was one option that was my own personal favorite. This is not necessarily a traditional romance novel in that there's not dual perspectives from the heroine and the hero. You don't necessarily know exactly who is going to be the guy that she chooses until nearer the end, but there's definitely a guy she should not choose. There's more than one she should not choose, and I was happy to say that I liked the ending and there was a happy ending to this book, so that was great. So I also said that I was going to read Notes on a Silencing, which I did, and I counted for Minari. I said I was going to reread Chemistry by Y.Q. Wang for a podcast episode that I did, and I did that. I thought I might read Bodega, We Ride Upon Sticks, or Her Body and Other Parties, and I have not read any of those, even though Her Body and Other Parties I think is somehow autobiographical or memoir related, so I probably could have counted that, but I was already reading Notes on a Silencing for the BookTube Nonfiction Prize. But what else did I read that was not on my TBR? Let me just grab that list for you. I actually did pretty well this month. I want to say, I think there were only one, maybe two things not on my TBR. There were only two things not on my TBR that I read. I read The Most Beautiful Thing, which is a picture book. I'll put a picture of it in this corner. This is part of an ongoing project I have where I have friends who are having children and I like to send them books as shower gifts and other things. And I don't want to just pick the same children's books that I enjoyed as a kid, because at this point, those books are at least 30 years old, sometimes older. And so instead, I've been trying to read more recent books from the library. I'll pick up picture books from the library. I'll read them. I'll see how I feel about them. And I've also really tried to emphasize reading more diverse picture books. So The Most Beautiful Thing is by a local Minnesota author. Her family was part of the sort of Hmong refugee resettlement, and so she is Hmong and her family is as well. And the book kind of talks about how, as a kid growing up, she didn't necessarily have everything, but she did have the most beautiful thing, which was sort of her family and her grandmother and the role of her grandmother in her life. I never know how to review picture books, so I'm not necessarily going to review this one. I will say I put it on my maybe list for sending to people. It's not one that I'm definitely going to push on all of my friends with children, but it's one that I could potentially see. The art is beautiful. Like, the art is extremely beautiful. And the only other book that was not on my TBR that I read, and this is one that I had put a hold on at the library, like as an ebook a couple months ago, and that just happened to come in during the month, and then if you don't read it, you lose it. So that was The Truth About Dukes, which is an interesting book because it's a historical romance from a series that I've kind of been enjoying, but kind of been struggling with, because I've been thinking more and more about the role of privilege in historical romance and sort of the elevation of sort of these upper class noble people. Series in some ways tries to subvert some of that, because it starts with a family that are elevated to a noble position when they find out that they are a distant relation and the estate is entailed in somehow shenanigans stuff from romance novels. But it is a family that grew up in poverty but were later earned their way kind of bootstrapped out of that with hard work and cleverness. So they come into nobility independently wealthy from their own hard work. I have a lot of feelings about that are not really fully defined. This book in particular, it was the daughter of that family, one of the daughters of that family, and then it was an actual sort of noble duke who was born a nobleman, but was for many years sent to a private asylum, more or less, for private one-on-one treatment from epilepsy, and his family pretended he was dead and stuff, so that affected the plot line. This series, I think, is trying to do some things, and I don't know how much it succeeds, but I also am currently dealing with sort of not knowing how much I feel about the prevalence of nobility in romance and also my enjoyment of historical romance, and I'm dealing with a lot of that personally. So I will probably not be reading more historical romance for a while. All the books that I have read in the month are listed down below, and I will mention one more thing. I am partway through World of Wonders, and I am partway through After the Last Border, and today is April 30th. I think there's a chance, I'm very hopeful, that I might finish World of Wonders before the end of the day, and then I will add that down below and say yay, I finished this in April. I can't tell you how I'm feeling about it, because again, that is also for the BookTube Nonfiction Prize. After the Last Border is also the BookTube Nonfiction Prize, and I will not finish it today, so that one I will be finishing in May. And then obviously I have not yet finished A Good Friend, The Time for the Truth. Those I think are primarily the books I'm carrying over into next month. I also have Mad and Bad, Real Heroines of the Regency, but I did not pick this up at all in the month of April, and I don't think I'll pick it up in May, because in May I'm going to be reading a ton of library books because I have to get them back to the library. I have a TBR for that where I kind of decide on the fly what I might read and when might order the order of that might be, so that will be posted soon. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know. I've been feeling increasingly dissatisfied with wrap-ups, because to me, I'm not sure what actually makes a wrap-up engaging to me. So if this wrap-up was engaging to you, let me know. If there's something you would rather see, let me know. I've been trying to playing with ideas of format, but haven't actually implemented any of them yet. Thanks for suffering through the terrible direct sunlight with me. Luckily, it sounds like they're on lunch break for the road work, so you didn't have to hear that, but it's just a beautiful day and I wanted to be outside. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.